So, I wore this to the opening night for The Last Jedi because I'm a bad person. And nobody said anything. I was a little disappointed. I was hoping to get some nerd rage, but I guess people are just really chill where I live, or probably in general, so no one said anything. But people on Facebook liked it, so I was validated with likes, so it was okay. I have kind of mixed feelings about this movie. Overall, I personally liked it, but I think how much you like this movie is going to depend on how much of a Star Wars fan you are and how much you liked The Force Awakens. Personally, I am much more of a Star Trek fan than a Star Wars fan. I've never really gotten into the expanded universe. I didn't even bother watching the prequels until a couple of years ago, and I low-key regret watching them. And so, for me, The Force Awakens, while it was just a rip-off of A New Hope, like, such a rip-off of A New Hope, it was a fun movie, and I enjoyed it, and I liked some of the new characters. I really like Rey. I do object to Rey being called a Mary Sue. I, in fact, object to the term Mary Sue at all, but that's a different video. And so seeing Rey again and seeing Daisy Ridley, I think, really improve in this role, actually. And I thought she was competent in the first movie, but I think she's a lot better in this one, and plays it with a lot more sincerity and vulnerability that really pulls you into the character. I think that this movie overall was a better movie than The Force Awakens. It had some really interesting moments, and I think that it was a really beautiful film overall. It was very aesthetically pleasing. So this is going to be a spoiler-free review. I'm just going to tell you some of the things that I liked and disliked without getting very specific about the plot. If you want stuff that's more specific about the plot, I am going to be doing a 5 things I liked about The Last Jedi and a 5 things I disliked about The Last Jedi video, because I think there were just some really good moments in this movie, but I do think that it had some pretty huge flaws as well. And again, I'm not really that much of a Star Wars fan. I watched the original trilogy with my mom growing up and I loved it, but I watched the animated Ewoks movie and the animated Droids movies. But I didn't really go much beyond that, and so for me, as a very, very casual fan, I feel like I had a lot less to nitpick about it. For example, watching this for me, I was much more along for the ride than when I was watching the new Star Trek movies, where of course then I was nitpicking every little thing. And so I think that's the experience my poor boyfriend had, because he is much more of a Star Wars fan than a Star Trek fan. See, the cultural exchange here, it's legit. No. So he was just like kind of seething in some scenes. He was pretty annoyed about it, I think. And I definitely see where he's coming from, because I mean, I've seen it done to my franchise. I understand why he's mad when it gets done to his. And so I think that if you're a huge Star Wars fan and you didn't particularly like The Force Awakens, you're probably not going to like this movie. I think you should go see it anyway, because there are some great scenes, and also hate-watching things can be fun. And Carrie Fisher's last performance is... I miss Carrie Fisher. She was one of my favorite parts of the original trilogy. And, sorry, I'm like actually sad now. I don't know why I did that to myself. The movie has a lot of just gorgeous, gorgeous scenes, gorgeous set pieces, really pretty action pieces as well. My issue is I went and saw this movie in IMAX 3D because friends arranged it and we all went as a group, so I didn't pick the theater. And I think I want to see this movie again, not in 3D, because I don't particularly like 3D movies. They tend to hurt my eyes and give me eye strain, and they often, to me, they add this like need to constantly remind the viewer that it's 3D. This movie didn't have that so much as the issue with the background kind of phasing back and forth when you're not sitting at exactly the right angle in the theater. And I thought the 3D detracted from the movie and made the CGI much more obvious. So I'd like to see it again and see if it looks any better without the 3D aspect to it. But for me, some of the CGI scenes I think detracted from the overall look of this film. There are a lot of plot tangents, and some stuff ends up being really pointless, which kind of makes it feel a little bit frustrating in some scenes. But there were just these scenes between characters that left you feeling things. And I think that's why I can't completely write this movie off as like a soulless Hollywood cash grab, because I do think that even though there was some cheesy lines about hope here and there, this movie does have a heart to it, and I think that's why I would watch it again. And I think it's kind of why it's on another level than The Force Awakens, which I think feels like it didn't have quite as much of an emotional core as this movie does. I think this movie gives the characters a lot more time to really breathe and be characters. And so I think that if you liked the characters in The Force Awakens, you'll really enjoy this movie. And this movie really is about the characters. I think this movie does in some ways have a few too many characters, and it can make the plot feel kind of fragmented. And because it separates people off into so many different parts of the movie ends up being really long, and sometimes it feels like there are some scenes that are a little bit bloated. Don't get me wrong, I will sit through a long movie. I used to marathon the extended cuts of Lord of the Rings with my mom on a regular basis. I can sit through a long movie. You just have to justify the length of your movie for me to do it. And there were some scenes where I'm kind of sitting there and I'm like, wow, this is sure a long movie, and there's sure a lot of plot to go, and this scene's not going anywhere, but okay. There were also a couple of moments that were a little bit absurd, and there were some just, I don't know if I want to call them retcons, but there were just some Force addendums that raised a lot of questions that I feel are now unanswered. But that might be because I'm such a casual Star Wars fan that I don't get them, maybe. But this movie raised some questions. Overall, though, there were marketable mascots for comic relief. I liked the Porgs. They were cute. And this movie does feel like in many ways it is meant to be very marketable. But I do think there's a core to this movie that makes it worth watching. I think it's very aesthetically pleasing. If you liked The Force Awakens, you'll like this movie. If you're a huge Star Wars fan, you will nitpick the hell out of this movie, and I don't know how much you'll be able to enjoy it. It really depends on how much you're able to turn off the nitpicking and just go along for the ride and go with the flow with this movie. And I'm not judging you if you can't. I have trouble doing that with reboots and modern interpretations of fandoms that I'm very attached to, so no judgment if you don't like this movie. Personally, I liked this movie. I would rate it like a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. Definitely like a solid movie with some really beautiful scenes. Anyway, that is all that I have for you on this. I'll be doing that 5 things I liked and disliked about The Last Jedi video maybe today or tomorrow, and I'll kind of break it down more in depth and actually talk about plot points more specifically. This was a spoiler-free review for people who have not seen the movie, so look out for that. If you like my videos, subscribe and let me know what you thought of The Last Jedi in the comments section down below if you've seen it, or what you're most excited for or nervous about if you haven't seen it. I'll also be doing a Q&A when I hit 1,000 subscribers, so if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments down below. If you dislike my videos, I am sure you will tell me. See you around next time. Auf Wiedersehen.